Welcome along to the Pastor's Heart. Dominic Steele is my name. It's great to have you with us this afternoon. We're live on Facebook this afternoon, so if you have a question for either of our guests, then put it in the comments below and we'll put it to them in a couple of moments' time. My guests today, Nigel Fortescue, the Senior Minister of Christchurch St Ives, and Jenny Brown, who leads the Family Systems Institute in Sydney. And we're talking today about how we can manage congregational and team anxiety in this post-COVID-19 reboot. We're addressing how we can care for our congregations and teams on the way back. We're seeing the different states of Australia at different stages of opening up at the moment, but how do we handle the fear of change? How do we navigate the decisions about when to start meeting together, and how do we help our members flourish in community while keeping physical distance? How can we come through this stronger? What about the feelings that we and our team members are experiencing, and how can we support each other over the next couple of months? The best advice for Australian churches is to still expect a protracted period with congregations limited to 100 people, with one person per square metres, and for many churches this is going to mean change, with congregations either divided or planted. Now, Jenny Brown is with the Family Systems Practice. She's an experienced family systems therapist and the author of Growing Yourself Up. Nigel, of course, at Christchurch St Ives, and he's actually just done a survey of the leadership there. Before we come to them, just a little note, we'd love your help with the Pastor's Heart if you could help us both get the word out by sharing this on social media, but also financially. Our little team that puts this together, we're not quite covering our costs, and we want this ministry to grow. And so if you're able to help us by going to bit.ly/thepastors Patreon or patreon.com/thepastors Heart and help us out at $5, $10 a month, something like that, that would be great. Now, hey, thanks very much for coming in, Jenny. Nigel?
Thanks, Dominic.
Nigel, why don't we start with you and the Pastor's Heart, and what is God doing on your heart at the moment in all of this?
Yeah, look, I've been reading my way through the Psalms. Did a series of devotions for church in the first 21 Psalms, and reading through the Psalms, I found a great little moment in Psalm 40, verse 16, where those who are seeking the salvation of the Lord, no matter what's going on around you, tumult and disaster and pestilence, anything else, the psalmist says, may it be that we can always say, the Lord is great. and I really like that, and I've been just saying to myself each day, no matter what, the Lord is great.
How have you been navigating that pestilence? That's
the same as everyone, with great trouble. It's a vexed time, but we're making our way through.
Right, yeah. So, Jenny, maybe we should start off. When I texted you late last week and said, could you come and talk to us about stress and anxiety in the congregation, you were immediately on message and thought, there's big problems everywhere. Yeah.
Well, not so much big problems, Dominic, but there could be.
Yeah.
It's being prepared for what are the predictable responses to anxiety in any group of people, a family or a church system. So to be prepared for the anxiety in self as the pastor, and the anxiety in the team, and the anxiety in the congregation, so that you're not caught off guard by the predictable responses to come, with the key message from Bowen Family Systems Theory applied to Christian ministry: work on observing your own triggers first and managing them as well as you can, so that you're not spraying your own anxiety reactions onto team, onto the congregation. We can never stop anxiety in this anxious, broken world. It will be there, particularly with the changes ahead for our churches. But everyone can be responsible for their reaction to the anxiety. How do we respond to our own and others' anxiety?
Well, let's come to that, how we respond and how we can manage it in a moment. Let's kind of set the scene a little, Nigel, because you realised there was going to be a range of responses at Christchurch St Ives, and so you did a survey, particularly of the key leaders of the church. Could you tell us some of the things you discovered?
Yeah, look, I've only been there for 5 minutes, and
like you were there for how many Sundays?
3 Sundays, and then it was like, Game over. I don't know the congregation well. I think all of us are struggling to really take the temperature on where people were at. And we felt that it was the best thing that we could do was actually to ask people and to say, where are you at? And to openly and honestly put out our hands and say, tell us. So we put a survey out among all of our key leaders to ask them what they're thinking about church now, about church in the future, what if we started up again, all sorts of different things.
What did you find out about people's attitudes and anxieties?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of both. and people have opinions on what ought to happen. People are worried, anxious about what might happen if we meet, if we don't meet. About 50% of people said, yes, I am keen to get back together.
I think we've got that. We'll put that up on the screen.
Yeah.
Will you be rushing back to church as soon as possible?
Yeah. So about 50% of people said, yes, I want to come back to church. And then 50% of people said, well, it depends, or no. You know, they're feeling concerned. Will church be prepared for a COVID-safe environment? Will I be safe? Will my family be safe if I come to church? And will church protect me so when I go back to my family, I'm not going to be infecting them unnecessarily?
And Jenny, it's the same issues in the staff team as in the church, I think you were saying.
Well, I hear from people who do some coaching, ministry coaching at our practice, that there is some tension on staff teams because people are exhausted. Things that
nobody's acting at their best at the moment.
No, and things that people didn't have to even think about before. You just knew how to do it. You have to find some energy to think about how to do it. And I'm hearing that there are some predictable responses of, we have to add more programs, we have to be more innovative, we have to reach out to the community and have innovative, creative programs in this COVID-19 world, and not slowing down and thinking about who's responsible for what here, who's willing and able to take this on. If there's a pressure on team members to take on projects without thoughtfully considering, does this fit in my job description? Am I competent to do this? That can create predictable tension. So just something to slow down, be thoughtful. At times of stress, we over-focus on tasks, getting things done, and pressuring people to do it.
Nigel, you've just taken over the leadership of 24 people on the Christchurch St Ives staff team. How did that description from Jenny, I mean, just share your inner thoughts.
Oh, yeah, look, I can imagine some of my staff team might watch this at some point in time and think, look, I know in myself I'm an over-functioner. So when things start to become increasingly stressful, I like to be able to have more control, because then my natural anxiety will go down. But when I do that, of course, I'm depleting everyone else and causing their anxiety to go up, because they don't know what they're meant to be doing anymore. And I was just reflecting earlier on a situation at our church that I need to go back and think about again. I've asked for a certain project to move ahead, and that's moving ahead, but I probably asked for that without actually asking the question of the person.
Tell us about it.
We're currently doing all of our services as pre-recorded online. As we look to transitioning to something else, and do we have a hub and spoke model with a service happening in the church, you can't sort of have a service that might happen with a few people pre-recorded. So what if we tried to do something online? And I got talking with our tech team and creative team and our Sundays team, and suggested, well, we should have a go at doing a live stream test and see how that might work out.
Going live.
Live.
Yep.
And but I didn't actually stop and say, how's everyone placed?
Yeah.
What if we tried to do something like this? Would that fit into your responsibilities? Are you happy to be involved in that? Is this something that we can achievably do? I sort of think I set a deadline and said, let's make it happen, and probably did that wrongly. Yeah.
I take it, Jenny, there'd be lots of people doing those kind of decisions at the moment, and therefore causing stresses for teams.
Indeed, and as I listen to you, Nigel, I can see in my own leadership of an organisation I've fallen into that trap. When stress is high, there is worry about finances. I move into over functioning, over control, a classic Bowen theory terminology. And what happens when we get caught in anxiously wanting to make decisions? We get focused on other people responding cooperatively, and when they push back or avoid or stay silent, then we're vulnerable to interpreting them as not being good team players. And the negative affect cycle can get activated. And that's the last thing we want on teams and going back at a time like this. Although it is inevitable, because we're wired that way when we're anxious to blame others, try and change others, diagnose others as not pulling their weight, and not look at ourselves.
Now, we had a very interesting discussion here last week with Brian Tung, senior pastor from down at Hurstville, who said the heat from COVID-19 is an opportunity to introduce some systemic change in the congregation, change that you might have been longing to see happen, but there hasn't been the possibility of heat. Now, as we had the conversation in our staff team about that, and we were thinking, what systemic change would we pray that God might bring about in our church? We thought, well, if we do these next things, that's going to increase more heat and more tension, and we've already got heat and tension, and how do we make sure we don't cook things too much? Jenny.
I had a listen to that very good interview, and I know a bit about adaptive leadership, and I do think it fits with systems thinking very well, distinguishing between content and technique issues and technical issues from the relationship process issues and the more kind of process of innovation and creativity, which are more fluid change factors. So I think it's a worthy thing to consider. But any kind of leadership model, if adaptive, as good as it is, you add anxiety in the leader to doing adaptive leadership, and it's going to create tension with the too much heat. So the response to heat with that kind of leadership is not be afraid of it, not go and hide and avoid, not be derailed, see it as natural and normal, anxiety in a system, change, be thoughtful, how do we love people well, what are values and principles to guide it, but allow people to try new things. Suggest new ideas, that's the adaptive leadership, thoughtfully, not out of anxiety that we've got to change everything with this new opportunity. Rather, just here's an opportunity to try new things, which all churches are doing at the moment. They have to, and not everything's going to work. It's not all going. There will be some failures. And that's part of the fluid learning process. That's not a disaster when things don't work, but we try them.
And we actually have a freedom to fail at the moment in a way that we perhaps might not in a different season.
I think too, there can be a little bit of confusion around just what this might look like, that somehow adaptive leadership or good leadership is about doing more, whereas in actual fact perhaps the most adaptive thing your church could do is actually to do less better. And you might say the big change we need is to slow down and be more prayerful. And I think that will reduce anxiety amidst people. It may create rather huge ructions, but at the same time it may actually people may think, yes, that's actually what we need to do, is recognise the sovereignty of God and peel back and get back to core business a little bit. So,
and that was one of the things you were saying to me earlier today on the phone, that I just can't overestimate how much I need to be praying at this time. You know, just kind of...
Yeah, I think there's a whole range of things that I've been pondering, and the first one is just, if you think you've prayed enough, you've probably only just started. And once you feel that you've prayed, then keep praying. We need to recognise that we have a God who remains on the throne. He rules a kingdom that cannot be shaken, and he is in charge of this world, and he is over everything that is going on at the moment, and we need to lay ourselves before him. And one of the first memory verses I remember learning was Philippians 4:6 and 7, And I think we need to really lean into praying and laying ourselves bare before God, and to do that continually, and He will guard our hearts and lead us in understanding.
Jenny, back to that, it sounded like the key thing was actually how I conduct myself in the system, and rather than the particular direction I was going to be leading people in. I think that's, if I'm just reflecting what I'm hearing you say, have I got that right?
Yes, it's an important piece of managing self in relationships, bringing our best to the relationships that we're part of serving, is reducing the focus on what do I want the other to do, how do I want them to be, how can I support them, change them, correct them, blame them, all those other focus
they're the
things.
problem things.
Yes,
Yeah.
or they're the vulnerable ones. And to what's going on for me right now? I mean, a great check, as you've said, Nigel, is am I attending to my own prayer life rather than getting anxious about my team members doing enough preparation? Am I coming to a meeting having really thought through what's our vision here? Have I prayed it through? Do I bring that sense of clarity, thoughtfulness and calm? And as I said earlier, calm is a tricky thing, because how can we be calm really in these times? And we don't want pretend, disingenuous calm. Calm that comes from attending to our own thoughtfulness, admitting our own concerns and anxieties to others in a helpful, honest way. And that gives people space to be themselves around us. How does that sound?
Yeah. How do you see that playing out in the way you're leading, Nigel, and how are you thinking about this?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've really been helped to see by a very small amount of reading in Bowen systems thinking is that the only person that I can really change is me. And the only person I can really control is me. And any effort to control another or a system or a staff team or a congregation or to make them something is only going to fail and cause you more problems. So if I can work on my own anxiety, work on myself and working on keeping myself calm, basic things, just take a deep breath before you say something and give your brain more oxygen so you can think more clearly. If I can work on starting my day prayerfully and ready to just take things on slowly and principally and not react on the basis of emotion, working on myself, then I can bring a calm, non-anxious presence, a calm presence to meetings, staff, congregation in a way that's going to help them actually reduce their anxiety as well. If I'm running around frantic and I'm sort of like, all right, everyone quick, we've got to do 8 things this morning and this is going to be a disaster and now we're going to do... Then everyone else is going to be like, oh, look, he thinks it's a disaster. We've all got to now think it's a disaster. Whereas if I can be calm as I can, given what Jenny has said, that's going to breed a sense of calm and reduce the anxiety in others.
So I was travelling fine through the idea of stage 1, 10 people can gather, thinking, okay, next is going to be stage 2, 20 people can gather. Probably mid-July, 100 people can gather, and thinking through plans of how to deal with stage 3. And then the Premier on Friday said 50 people can gather, and just out of left, I mean, for restaurants and pubs. But if she said that for restaurants and pubs, pretty soon the churches will follow in the next few days, I'm guessing. But just that out of left field, and suddenly we're all anxious again. Do you have the same reaction, or how did you exercise calmness there?
I think by approaching...
Sorry, I just want to be clear. I wasn't out yelling at the Premier or anything like that.
I think coming at things with a genuine sense of intrigue and questioning. And rather than sort of thinking, I must react to every piece of information, actually being able to pause and say, okay, well, what does this actually mean for us? And that slowing things down so that you're not feeling like, oh, quick, the church next door is going to open up, we need to open up too straight away, or something else like that, but actually just slowing things down and thinking, oh, there's another piece of information. According to what the plan that our church is on, how do I react to that? How do we react? How do we, the whole church, react to that bit of information that's going to be helpful according to the plan we're on, and where do we need to adjust, where do we need to change, and not feeling like you need to panic or rush. So asking questions, what's this going to mean for us, rather than quick react, I think is what I try to do and fail at regularly.
Jenny, what's your advice? I mean, there's going to be differences of opinion about how quickly we should open up, and every church is going to have differences of opinion, both within the leadership team and within the wider congregation. What's your advice to the senior pastor on navigating that?
Well, I'm not in the role of a senior pastor, so I'd be very careful to give advice. I'm thinking, what would be the principles that might be useful to senior pastors at a time like this? I like Nigel's point on slowing it down, not getting driven into making impulsive, automatic decisions. I think that being very careful for the push for agreement. We all have to be on the same page before we move ahead. At times of change, there is a togetherness push. Bowen noted in his research for groupthink, fusion, we must all agree, and insisting on agreement, rather than a thoughtful leader who can listen well, not do pretend consultation. So people want to know, how is this survey going to be used? Is it just to make us all feel that there's a token inclusivity, which would be a false togetherness? Like being real and honest about, this is what we're doing with the information. This is how, as a team, we're making the decisions. We might not get it right the first time, but with God's help, we are committed to being thoughtful, keeping the church's vision in mind, staying missional, and we're doing our best and need your prayers, and your input will be valuable to us. So just watching out for the pull that everyone must agree, and not being fearful of threat to unity when people get upset with us as leaders. I'm not a leader in a church, I'm a member of the congregation, but in a different leadership setting.
I mean, if we put up the slide from the breakdown slide of Nigel's 4 congregations, this is interesting because his evening congregation is, well, they're already over the line in terms of the majority wants to go back, and yet your 10:30 in the morning congregation are much more conservative on the return to meeting. And so how do you lead? I mean, you can't be totally poll driven, Nigel.
Absolutely not. You need to. I mean, we've asked people for their thoughts. We have gathered that information. We've collated into what I hope is a fair-handed report. We've sent that back to all the leaders, and now we're hoping to keep listening to them in continual dialogue, and not just sort of go, well, 50% said this, so we're doing this. But actually to say, we are genuinely wanting to listen. We're genuinely wanting to understand. We're genuinely wanting to respond to our people in our place at this time, and not be anxious about what other churches are doing or thinking, or other groups of people are doing or thinking, because we love these people who God has given us, and we're going to pastor and care for these people who God has given us.
Now, just for those watching or listening, the link to Nigel's report is in the notes under this video. Jenny, you read it today, and what struck you as you read it?
Well, I love impressive graphs. And I actually think there's kind of an anxiety-lowering effect of doing something like that, and that's not bad. You know, you collate things, you see the visuals, and it's impressive. So it's then to get behind that and think, what are we hearing here? I thought it was very interesting that some people's responses are very relaxed and others are writing a lot of information as if their leaders don't know what the current health guidelines are. Like every little detail being written into it. And that's predictable. That anxiety about the what if this goes pear-shaped, and there is a spread when we go back together. So it's useful to hear the process behind people's comments the anxiety that's there about what might happen, and respect that, not just to take the data itself as useful.
What are the key things you think ministers need to be thinking about in terms of this leadership process over the next week or so? Jenny.
Looking at you, Nigel, on that one.
Well, it's okay. We'll start with you, Nigel. Yeah.
Look, I think every leader needs, first of all, to think actually about themselves. They need to come before the Lord. They need to give some careful consideration to their own levels of anxiety and what they're bringing to their staff team, their elders or wardens or, presbytery or whatever system you're in, what you're bringing to your congregation, what's being communicated by the facials and the meta-narrative in your videos and your posts and bits and pieces that you need to actually get a grip on yourself. I think that's first and foremost, consider yourself. And then after that, a whole range of different bits and pieces, really. Don't worry about you can't say to people, don't worry, because everyone's worried. But work hard at focusing on who God's given you, not who God has given the guy down the road. Work on focusing on what's actually happening in the midst of your people, being available and actually being ready to have conversations with people, to answer the phone, to listen, to really allow people to feel heard. If you can have the conversation with someone who disagrees vehemently with the position you've taken on A, B or C, or the direction you're going or something else like that, and they feel heard and they feel like you've understood the concerns that they've expressed and you've genuinely listened, but you've worked principally to stay with the position that you've determined to be in, so you're working in accordance with your principles and not reacting emotionally to everything, then that'll help everyone's anxiety lower, because they'll see, look, Nigel, Bill, Bob, Dominic, you've got a plan. I might disagree with the plan, but I've understood more of the plan now as you've articulated it to me, and I can see that you're not going to be swayed by me coming in here and being panicked, because you're just slowly, considerately, prayerfully working through where you're heading and working at that. And that does, I think, when the things are communicated well, it lowers the anxiety. People may still disagree, but they know that you're prayerfully working forward with a plan to bring about the best for that congregation. This is not A plus B equals C, 1 plus 1 equals 2. There's there's a million things that'll all go wrong in all of that, but that's sort of the basic trajectory that I will be trying to continue walking down the road with.
Jenny, your thoughts there? Yeah.
Hearing accepting the people would disagree, I would add to that to be very careful not to put too much energy into the most anxious people's disagreement. It will happen. There will be pushback and disagreement. Hearing people, yes, but not putting too much effort into trying to reach a resolution around that. However, staying in contact with people who disagree, but not around the content of the disagreement, which is usually just a vehicle for anxiety. It's not itself the cause of it, whatever the disagreement issue is about. So stay in contact with people who are anxious and disagreeing, but friendly contact, not giving them a lot of time around, I need your point of view to help us lead. I think that's useful to be reminded of, and to be a good observer of self. We're all affecting each other at this time, all the time in our relationships. So watching how other people respond to us, what effect am I having on others, what challenges is my reaction style presenting to others, invaluable. And as a congregation member, I just want to say to all the pastors dealing with these changes how grateful I am in my own church, and I'm sure others share that sentiment, and just the absolute value of hearing your own pastor prepare a word from God's word Sunday by Sunday, week by week, and to still be sitting under that pastoral leadership is a wonderful thing that has not been disrupted as much as I thought it would be.
Yeah, it has been, yeah. Yeah. Jenny Brown, thanks very much for coming in. And Nigel Fortescue, thank you for coming in. Jenny, just before you go, you've got a conference coming up, an online conference with one of our former guests, Dr. Robert Creech. Do you just want to tell us about that? Because it's available to people all around the world because it's online.
Indeed, it's online, and I know we're all a little bit over Zoom conferences, but this will be particularly distinctive in bringing a family systems view of the church. Robert Creech is going to be talking about crisis leadership and how to be prepared for managing leadership well. I'm going to be talking briefly about dealing with the push for togetherness when we come back together as a church, and how to separate out gospel unity from anxious unity. Tara Stenhouse, who's written a chapter in our book on pastoral care, is going to be talking, she'll be interviewed about mature pastoral care as we go back into gradually opening up our churches in a new COVID-19 world. So I do commend it to you. It's running over 2 mornings, and there are in end of July and early August.
Great.
Special offers for people in joining in.
The link, we'll put the link at the bottom of this program, but thefsi.com.au, and the conference is called Leadership in a Time of Crisis. You've been with us on The Pastor's Heart. My guests have been Jenny Brown and Nigel Fortescue. My name's Dominic Steele, and we'll catch you next week on this program.